Today we're going to be getting a little bit into Target specifically, doing a little bit of an overview of Target's supplier portal, partners online, but going into a little bit of detail with some of the things that we really think are essential functions of partners online, of that portal, and maybe some kind of helpful tools and takeaways for some of you as well. Alrighty, this is us. Clint here is our product manager for Target, meaning he runs the show for all of the services that we have for Target, which over the years has made it so that he's really our Target point man. He's the go-to person for all things related to Target. And I am here to create more of this wonderful content for you guys. So our emails will be at the end, but my job is to have my finger on the pulse of the supplier world, of Target suppliers, but of any kind of supplier in Amazon, Kroger, Walmart, or Target. So let me know what we can research for you. What are the kind of questions that you have? What are some of the apps and partners online that you'd like for us to dive a little bit deeper into, for example? But yeah, that's what we do. And today, what we're going to be doing is an overview of the portal, Partners Online. We're going to be looking at valuable data. Where can I go to find data for insights into our business, into your Target business? Then we'll be doing important reports and what you need to build them is the kind of the third part of that. We'll do a general Q&A at the end, which I'll talk a little bit more about on the next slide, before we go into a little bit of a product preview for what SupplyPike solutions there are for Target. And some of you have signed up for that already. You know who you are. If you haven't signed up for that, feel free to stay on and learn a little bit more about what our product is. But if you don't want a sales pitch, of course, feel free to step off the call. Okay, so a few of the frequently asked questions that we get on these webinars is, will I be receiving a copy of the slide deck? Will I be receiving a recording of the webinar? Yes, to both of those. In about 3 to 4 business days, we need to touch things up, touch up the video recording, and then we send them out all at once. So we're also on YouTube, and we upload all of our videos to YouTube now. So go ahead and search for SupplyPike on YouTube and subscribe, and you'll never miss a webinar that way. We also get a lot of questions during the webinars themselves. And so we have 2 kinds of main places for inter-webinar communications. The first one is the Q&A tab. That's for your more official questions that you have for Clint or for myself during the webinar. That way we can kind of filter them through to their specific parts of the webinar itself. Maybe one question is much more relevant for one section than for another. Maybe this is a question that I want to save for the end because I feel like it'll be a good conversation starter. So if you have official questions, go ahead and put those in the Q&A tab. But if you have more of a kind of a general comment, like you want to let us know what your favorite summer activity is, that's what the chat is for. That is public. Everyone can see it. And it can be a great tool for sharing insights and for starting conversations generally between all of you and us. So that's the difference between those two. And yeah, a little bit about SupplyPike before we get started. SupplyPike started out doing AP deductions at Walmart. We're in the Northwest Arkansas area, so we started helping people dispute invalid AP deductions way back in the day, but we're really growing into a much larger space now of trying to help retail suppliers reduce revenue loss in as many ways as possible. There's a lot of new initiatives that we're really excited about that we're starting, and there's a lot of really great companies that we get to work with, like some of these listed down here that we're very proud of working with. And yes, there's been a huge dollar retail impact that we've been a part of and that we're really proud of as well. But aside from that, really what we want to do is to be with CPG suppliers from the beginning to the end of the process, to help it be as smooth as possible and to help them keep as much of the revenue that they deserve as possible as well. All right, Clint, go ahead and take it away.
Cool. Yeah. So like Peter said, if you guys have any questions along the way, feel free to drop them in the Q&A or in the chat. Okay, so we'll try to get through as much of this kind of foundational stuff as possible, because I imagine most people want to spend some time looking at actual reports, building actual reports, and kind of, us sharing any best practices that we've kind of seen aggregated across all the various Target suppliers. So real quick, for anyone that's brand new, Partners Online, this is Target's ecosystem that contains all the apps and reports relevant to suppliers and vendors. Contains all your documents, guidelines, has a great search feature if you need to find stuff. So question to everyone on here, if you could just drop in the chat, like, hey, what are some, for people that already know Partners Online, what are some reports and documents that you find most helpful or that you reference most often that could be kind of helpful for everyone in the group to share that in the chat if you could. And if, like I said, if you're new, what is it used for? So this is kind of where you need to go to manage your business with Target. Outside of emailing back and forth with your various Target counterparts, this is where kind of, like I said, it houses their data. It's the ecosystem and your home base for kind of anything you need to get done. So we'll kind of give you some orientation tips here. So within Partners Online, when you're kind of checking out the apps, they will give you kind of alerts about, hey, we're making an update here, or we've changed something. So watch out for these little app alert notifications kind of on the right-hand side of your apps and reports page. And you can click into that and they'll give you a little bit more information. They'll tell you when it's happening. So they posted in this example from April 26th, like, hey, we're letting you know now that something happened in February. So just something to be aware of. Their news and updates section of Partners Online is also pretty up to date and useful. So anytime they have like a block on compliance, so let's say a DC can't receive goods due to weather or construction, or maybe they're too full, which happened quite a bit over the last few years. That's where they will kind of post those updates. So it's a good idea to kind of check into Partners Online at least once a week if you can. Cool, yeah, and some stuff in the chat. So yeah, we've got I'll save some of the specific Q&A for later. Brenda, that question on how to run any report for Target. Yeah, we're gonna get into some of that. It might depend on exactly what you're trying to run. So maybe that's something we can dig into in the Q&A section kind of towards the end. So yeah, like we mentioned, the search. So when you're in Partners Online, there's a couple of places to search. They do have some filters that you can use. So it's a good idea to use those judiciously to dig into specific parts of Partners Online. There's a lot of different areas. It's not the best layout, but when you kind of use the search, you can really get through a lot of stuff pretty quickly. And as far as kind of understanding the ecosystem, so like we said, the Partners Online platform, this is kind of the baseline where everything you kind of start. And then they've got this thing called Greenfield, and it's like a data platform, and they build apps on top of Greenfield, and you access Greenfield within Partners Online. If you've got a favorite saved in your browser, you can navigate directly to it, and it'll just ask you to log in through Partners Online, but then it'll push you right back. So we'll get into the vendor report card here a little later. That's one we're going to look at specifically. But a lot of what we're going to do for their vendor report card is very applicable to like digging into data for vendor IQ, like if you're trying to understand your sales data or your in-stock data. Supplier performance management. We'll do some more on these in a moment, but it's the same as vendor report card, basically. Purchase orders, you can dig into details there. AP import, this is where you can see like chargebacks for import vendor numbers that you may have for your business. AP domestic, that's accounts payable. That's what AP stands for. That's where you can kind of get a handle on upcoming chargebacks, upcoming payments from Target, the details of payments when they have paid you. And if you need to kind of track down deductions, that's also pretty useful there. Storing DC addresses. So if you do any kind of mapping or analytics based on location. You can get detailed location information on each of Target's stores and DCs, as well as their like food DCs and their e-com stores that are like dedicated e-com stores that they run out of fulfillment centers. And then unsaleables and guest returns, you can kind of dig into some of those as well. And these are all apps that are based on Greenfield within Partners Online. And then Synergy is just kind of a dedicated, it's an example of a dedicated Partners Online app. And this is in older vendors or vendors that have been with Target for a while may remember its old name, VDT, the vendor dispute tracking. They rebranded it as Synergy last year and made some slight changes to it. But that's one that we'll also dig into a little bit here because it's one a lot of vendors can spend some time in. So like I said, we'll dig into that here a bit later. So for like I said, vendor dispute tracking, I'm getting a little ahead here, but yeah, it's all about where you're if you've got deductions and you want to fight them, Synergy is the place you do it. It's also where you can get proof documents, and it's where when you create those disputes, you want to make sure you add your documents to those so that when Target does their due diligence to understand was a deduction valid or not from their point of view, they've got what they need to do that. And yeah, AP domestic, specifically the open payables, specific document search. I think we had a question on that. Payment information, credit debit memo report. These are all kind of sub reports within the accounts payable domestic app on Greenfield. And those are all really useful. So if you're trying to understand what open payables, like what have I kind of invoiced Target for that they're still waiting to process, specific document search, you can look up your invoices that are open or unprocessed, as well as paid. You can look up credit and debit memos. It's really good for kind of everything but checks. For checks and check lines, that's where you get into the payment information part of accounts payable domestic. And then credit debit memo report, this is where you can research deductions specifically. So yeah, it's a good place to, like, if you see a deduction on a check line, take that document number, go to credit debit memo report, and then you can research that specific deduction there and get some more details about, like, okay, well, what PO was it related to? Maybe what invoice was it related to? Perhaps what are the items that are being affected by this deduction? So that's where you can get some more of that kind of detail there. And import is a bit similar, but it's specifically deductions. In this place, they call them claims. They don't normally use the word claim in Target land. Usually they just say chargeback or deduction. But in this case, it's an import deduction, aka claim. And you can see those in your accounts payable import if you have any import vendor numbers. And if you want to dispute those, same process that goes through Synergy. The purchase orders app within Greenfield. So this one, you dig into kind of the header and item level for purchase orders if you want to. It's not going to be a substitute for any kind of EDI documents if you've got to use those to dispute things. But if you're trying to track down kind of older things or recent, especially recent purchase orders, you can get some details in there and kind of understand what does Target have on their radar or not. Oftentimes Target will have trouble matching up purchase orders, and well, not often, but when exceptions arise, that's when a lot of the things that we spend our time on, or you may spend your time on, is trying to help Target fix where things went wrong between matching invoices, purchase orders, and deliveries, and then understanding the items that make up all those. So this can be a useful report if you're trying to figure out what's going wrong on the Target side. Like we said, storing DC addresses by state, by the Target number of the store, or the DC by market. They'll give you different kind of classifications and how things roll up, like, oh, this store maps to this DC, this regional DC, or the other types of DCs. So it's really useful. And if you need specific contact information, maybe you want to reach out to a DC that's nearby that and schedule a tour and figure out, why do they always misreceive our product? Or the operations at this DC, we never have issues, but we see a lot of deductions come through this other one. You can try and maybe get in contact with those or set something up with Target specifically to understand the processes at these DCs. We have seen some vendors do that, and that has been helpful for them to understand changes they can make and leverage they can pull on their side to improve their operations and efficiencies for stuff going to Target. And then, okay, what can they do to maybe make things easier for Target on the other side, right? Like color coding, or how you put labels, or the specific size or types of labels and meeting all those requirements, or how you build palettes, right? So all that can kind of go into what happens at a specific DC and the consolidators along the way to make sure receiving goes smoothly or not. And again, that varies by DC. So this can be pretty useful when if you want to dig into that kind of location-based analytics. So vendor report card, this is one we're going to look into here in a minute. So yeah, it's primarily meant for tracking compliance and shipping performance. You can also use it to dig into, Target said, oh, we're short 20 on this order, but maybe we're over 20 on another order. You can see that in an app like vendor report card. So if it was the same DC, the same, same DC, same day, but maybe different appointments or different purchase orders, but it's your product arriving at the same place at the same time. They can sometimes miscount or misattribute, misreceive the product, and you can see some of that data in vendor report card to show them, hey, you're over 20 here, you're short 20 here on this same item. Use that overage to offset this shortage. And sometimes they're good about doing that on their own when they do the due diligence and work a dispute. But sometimes they need a little help, and you can use the data from here to figure that out for them and kind of guide them along that path to understanding the invoice quantity matches, the ASN quantity matches, the BOL quantity matches, your receiving data quantity matches. So it seems like everything's fine. And SPM does the same thing the vendor report card does, but the difference is that it's for the new format purchase orders. So Target does have two formats of purchase orders. You can see them here on the slide. There's the modern and the legacy. The modern one, you've got 11 and then 4. The legacy, you've got 4, 7, 4. An important update that's going to happen here, Target is making a change. Right now, it's scheduled to happen at the beginning of June, where they will be combining the vendor report card and supplier performance management from 2 apps, 2 data sets into one. And that's going to be called the Supplier Performance Management Dashboard, or the SPMD. So that should be happening at the beginning of June, based on the latest update they posted earlier this week. And that will combine these 2 purchase order formats. You'll still have all the same, like 9 different tabs or so, where you have to go into all the different dashboards and different views to kind of figure stuff out. But instead of having like 18, now you'll just have 9. So it'll be a little bit better of a process, hopefully, but something to be on the lookout for. And everything that we're going to go over here today, like it'll still be relevant for that. You just might be clicking into a different data set, but we'll talk about that here in a few minutes. Vendor IQ. So if you're more on like the sales and inventory side, or you want to understand some of that and how that relates to your function at your company, right? Maybe you're in sort of the logistics or shipping side, or maybe you're on the accounts receivable side or the finance side, however, whatever function or silo you're in. Vendor IQ, as well as these other ones we're going to get into here in a second, those can all be really useful. Like I said, here on the slide, you can look at your performance over time, your inventory, understanding your out of stocks, how healthy might your pipeline be. So it's a really good, if you've got time, or if you've got a broker or someone that can dig into the stuff for you, it's really good to kind of look at, all right, what do we have on order? What do we have in store? What's been selling? What's our on hand for each store? And kind of tell that story across the supply chain pipeline. And unsellables. So this one is going to be going away in the nearest future. I think by the end of the year, it's supposed to be out. But for the time being, you can still use this one in Greenfield to understand returns, basically, or yeah, unsellable or defective transactions. And that can be useful if you're trying to track down, like, hey, we got this return deduction. Did they use the right policy, or did they use the right cost? Or what were some of the reasons for the return? So you can find some more of that information in this Greenfield app. Other ones that are pretty useful that we won't have near enough time to go into today: target vendor income and the business partners dashboard. So TVI, that's when vendor pays Target to do something. So like a promotion, right? So, hey, Target, I'll pay you based on a contract, sales-based contract, perhaps, to have some sort of incentive to help your product sell. So, and those can also have like allowances tied to them, digital accruals. So if you've got an e-com business, Target charges a little fee specifically to, I think they called it, manage the exceptional cost to doing e-com business. But you'll see all that kind of detail in TVI, and those come through as deductions, but you can find the contract details for all those in the TVI apps. And then BPD, so if you have a broker, or if you guys do a lot of big data, like you really want to ingest all of it and stick it in like an ERP somewhere in your company, likely you might be using this to get some of that. Okay, so getting into some more important reports. Greenfield does offer quite a few pre-made ones, and we'll kind of look at some of those here in a moment. Personally, I do a lot of custom reports, either when we're trying to research new things, but also helping vendors problem solve stuff that they're seeing. So that's what we're going to do here in a few minutes. But I'm kind of curious, like, how many people here on the call have ever made their own custom report? Like, you've created a new card in Greenfield. Based on most vendors we've talked to, most people haven't done that, and maybe they kind of leave that up to their brokers. But I'm just kind of curious, hasn't anyone here ever created your own custom Greenfield report? Just curious, if you guys could drop that in the chat, that would be very appreciated. A yes or no is good enough. And if you want to give details, even better. Yeah, I would expect most people to say no. But if we've got any yeses, that would be unexpected, but good. So we'll go into some of this here in detail in a second, but Greenfield does give you kind of a side menu. This is going to be part of your hamburger menu, and we'll get into the hamburgers versus the kebabs versus the meatball menus in a moment. But this will be in kind of your top right corner. They'll give you your home data sets. That's all the different types of data that you can get into. Cards, those are like the individual tables that you create that you can export or you can put on charts. Dashboards are collections of cards. There's different sites within Greenfield, like help sites, notifications if you've set those up. If you have really big exports in Greenfield, like things that are longer than 30,000 rows, they'll recommend that you do a request, and then they'll kind of process that on the side and let you know when it's ready to go. And you have quick links if you have any of those set up. So this is what we're going to dig into here in a second, is creating a card. So we're not going to spend a ton of time right here. We're going to just dig into it. And if you guys want the details after the fact, when we send out this presentation and the video later, you'll have these here for reference. And yeah, works best on Chrome. That's Target's recommendation. Every card gets a unique ID number. So if you end up creating one and then you save it, you can kind of navigate directly to that based on the card ID. And that's something that you could like share with team members that also have access to Partners Online. And if you have questions, they do have, like if you've got like a shared Slack channel with Target, they do have the Greenfield support one. And you can also use the ticketing function to submit questions there. Filters are really useful. We'll get into those here in a moment. As far as when to use each Greenfield app, yeah, definitely AP domestic. If you're a domestic supplier and you're curious about what Target's paying you and anything they're deducting, you want to be into that one. We've kind of talked through most of these: supply performance management, vendor report card. We're going to get to that in a second. Vendor IQ, sales, inventory, financial information. Like, hey, what's our sales to date for the latest 52 weeks, or what's our break down my sales by item over our current fiscal year. You can build all that and set that up and have it be refreshed anytime you check it. So good stuff to be aware of. And yeah, for compliance disputes, yeah, check in on your on-time ship, your fill rate, your EDI 856 accuracy, because that's where Target will deduct your money. And we'll show you where those live here in a moment. Yeah, shortage disputes. So this is what we're going to do. We're going to build a report that will help you dig into proving or disproving shortages and how to find overages that offset those shortages. So kind of picking out misreceiving. We may or may not find a real example. We're going to build this live and we'll see what's in the data that we've picked. But if not, it's really easy to illustrate. And the main point here is showing you how to get in and build something so that you can go find on your side anything that looks like this. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing and then I will reshare here in a moment. Any questions so far?
We don't have any questions particularly. We have the one general question that you've already seen that I think we should kind of just save for the end to kind of revisit in terms of which specific reports to pull, but I think that we're good so far. But if you have questions, don't forget to get them in now so that we can organize them and all that by the end. But yeah.
Okay, so when you land on Partners Online, it's going to look like this. So here's that news and updates that we were mentioning. Apps and reports, we are going to go get into the vendor report card here. And we're trying to build a report that'll help us figure out, like, hey, we've had some shortage deductions. We wonder, are those valid or not? And we want to see if there's any due diligence that we can do. And this is what Target should do on their side, but sometimes they need some help. So we're going to see if we can figure some of this out ahead of time. And when you land on the VRC dashboard, the SPM dashboard, the supplier performance management one for the new POs, remember this one's for the legacy, looks just like this. It's just a slightly different data flowing in. And we expect for the new one that's going to be launching in June, that combines these two will look very similar. It'll just have both POs flowing in instead of just one. So, but yeah, if you want to see your monthly performance, you can click in here. On-time ship collect, this is where you can see collect fines. If you have prepaid business, you would see prepaid performance and fines here. Your fill rate and item fill rates are here, and your 856 accuracy and availability. So your availability and your fill rates and your on-time ship, that's where you're going to get your compliance fines from, and that's where you can track those. So for us, we're going to be clicking into the collect here because we know we've got a collect supplier, and we're going to dig into what sort of goodies can we find data-wise to prove or disprove a shortage. So they give you kind of this trended performance, like, okay, so they've been having a few issues over here with late, we can see based on this legend here. But we want to get into some more purchase order specific things. So that's what we're going to dig into here. Okay, so we've got this performance detail report that we're looking at. And there's also kind of a violation summary report down here that'll give you at the PO level. And there's also some that it will get down to kind of the item level. So if you're just curious for like, hey, recent POs, how are they performing? That's where you can see this one right here. If you want to know, okay, recent violations, and we want to get ahead of those. So they haven't issued a deduction yet. They haven't issued a compliance fine, like a VC chargeback, which they would have. You initially get a violation ID that will turn into a VC chargeback number. But you can use this one to submit your exemption requests. So you've got a 2-week window to request you're not deducted and to provide your proof why. And you use the data from here to do that. If you do get deducted, you use this compliance research report to relate it to specifically the deduction number to try and dispute that. So, but these are really helpful if you want to dig into kind of the item level details, and I'll show you how to do that. So you've got this little button over here, and this is going to take you to a page that expands this table. So we're going to do that. Okay, and once you're here, it gives us a lot of the same information. And if you just need this PO level, kind of high level stuff, and you're going to go dig into data on your side, this can be good enough. I would recommend that you do it. There's a couple of options here, but this guy right here, build a card, that's where you can just kind of start from blank. But I know I want to dig into this specific data, so I'm going to click this kebab menu. So this is your hamburger. So it looks like a hamburger. You've got your bun, your meat, and the bottom bun. Kebab, you've got your 3 dots. If this were horizontal, like we don't have any meatball ones, but if this were horizontal, that'd be called a meatball menu. But click your kebab and go to card details. And here, oh, this is the data set. So you click your data set, and that's going to get us into this area here. It gives us details about the data set. We just want to go ahead and create a card with this data set here. So that's what we're going to do. If I can get my window sized appropriately. There we go. Okay, so let's create a card. And now we're in the card builder, and Target does offer some training videos on this. I would recommend you guys watch those. But we'll kind of breeze through this here. When you make a new card, it has this default count of rows, generally not very useful. It's just kind of the default. I would get rid of that. And this is where we can really start to have some power with the data. So you've got this add columns here. So click that. And this is where we can start to pick any of the kind of the information about the data, right? So metrics is going to be where we have all the numbers. So if I want to know like, hey, what was over, what was under, give me those quantity numbers. Metrics are where we find that. But if I need to know like what's the item name, or what's the location name, or what's the purchase order number, all those kind of non-number types of data, that's in the dimensions area. So I know like, okay, appointment ID, that's like, that turns into the delivery receipt number. So I probably want that. There's dates that you can get available here. So when was it available to pick up? What was threshold for issuing an order for it, or what's the brand? We're going to pull in DPCI, which is Target's item number. And we also want to get, so we've got fill rate measure date, the vendor measure, the first receipt date. Let's see, was it an import order? We want BOL number and pro number. Let's pull in a SCAC just for fun. This is location ID. So that's going to be our DC number. So I know I want that. And we've got merchandise brand, class, department, division, group, item description. Let's see. And we want to get some purchase order information. Here we go. PO. So we want that. So that's the purchase order identifier. Yes, question on the date range. We will do a date range. Yes. So we're just picking our types of things we want at the moment. So we've got our appointment ID, and we've got our item identifier, DPCI, and we've got our location ID and a PO. So this is good enough. There's lots of other stuff in here that you could pull in if you want. For our purposes here, this is good enough. You can pull in trailer information, like what date was it in the yard? If you want that level of detail, if you've got multiple vendor IDs, you can pull those in here to kind of cut by that. But this is good enough for what we need. So I'm going to go over to metrics now. Well, I'll just hit apply so you guys can see some of that fill in here. Sometimes there are blanks. You just got to be prepared for that. But we need some of the actual like quantities, right? That's what we're trying to figure out here. So I'm going to add column, go to metrics, and I know that I want original. So I'm typing ORG. So let me get the fill rate original quantity. And I know I want the revised as well. So let me get the revised quantity. And I will say sometimes they've got, let's just put it in here all the way, right? So they will have multiple of these sometimes. So FR revised, but then you notice when we had it here, there's a few other ones. So we'll pull in some of these other ones, but we'll probably get rid of them in a little bit. But let's pull those in to see. Next, we want things that are over. So over original quantity, over revised quantity, and we want things that were short. So we've got the short original and the short revised. Let's hit apply there. And I'm going to check to see, do any of these have no data in them, or do they have repeated data? So, okay, this fill rate revised, that's a %. Maybe you need that. That's not what I'm looking for at the moment. So I'm going to get rid of that by pressing this X over here. So the data is a little smaller, a little easier to work with. And we've got some duplicates. So yeah, we'll just keep the revised quantity, has a shorter name. So shorter and more concise is usually a little better. Same thing, the overs are duplicate and the shorts are duplicate. So we will just, oh, that's right, we've got the original revised. Yeah, we'll keep those there. Okay. So at this point, I've got the data I want, but now per the question from Peggy there, we want to know, hey, let's do some specific date ranges here. And you can do something very specific, like, hey, like 1 week or 1 day, or I'm going to do a big range here because sometimes you want to, I like to have a single export to deal with. So I'm going to do kind of a between here, but you can do like, hey, let me do the latest, 6 months or something. So you can say, yeah, give me the latest 6 months. I'm going to do a specific date. So let's just go back to the beginning of 2022. So we don't have too much data, but let's just see what that looks like. So I've got from there to, I guess, next week, because that's one of their current quarter or current periods. I'm going to hit apply and kind of see what do we have here. We've got a lot of blanks, but I can see I've hit the max for this preview. And that's what this is. What we're looking at here, this is just a preview of the data. It's not all the data. So you oftentimes want to make sure you kind of click through and finish and save the card before you export it. Because we could export this right now, but I know that, okay, page 1 of 40 for 25 per row, that's the max for what they will show in the preview. So I need to go ahead and save this to make sure I get all the data. So I'll hit next here. If we want to have any default sorting, you could do that. So you need to like sort on PO or sort on any dates you may have brought in, sort on quantities or anything like that. And you can do that here. I'm not going to do that. If you wanted to filter for specific POs or for specific locations, let's say, I know we always have issues at DC 580, like, okay, let me filter the data for only DC 580 and hit apply there. I happen to know that across vendors, 580 is a particularly troublesome DC, so maybe we'll leave that in to just kind of keep the data small. And the filter for the viewer, not worried about that at the moment. The drill through, not worried about that at the moment. At this point, we just need to name our card. So we're going to do that here in a moment. And let's see. So there's a few fields you want to deal with when you're naming. So you've got your card name. I'm just going to call this the PO over short check. You can call it whatever you want. I don't know if they allow dashes or slashes, make that a dash. If you want to give it more descriptions, you can. This is going to be mainly for you. You can also share these cards with others. You can mark it either internal or confidential if you want it to be just your account. So if it's confidential, only you can see it. If it's internal, that means you and anyone at your company can see it. If you want to enable external access, that means you can share it to other vendors. Like let's say you're a broker that works with multiple vendors, you can build something and share it if you need to. Depending on the data you're working with, that could make sense. Enable save as, probably want to do that. So at this point, I would hit done. And we're not out of it just yet. We want to save it. That's the final step to get out of the preview. Now we have all the data. It looks like we're still kind of running into the max there. So if we wanted to export this, they're probably going to tell us to use the request. But I think we've got what we need. So that was quick. Let me just talk through that. So I clicked the menu here. I went to export and I exported to CSV. They gave me a file down here. That is what I want. And this is what it looks like. And that was a lot of steps to get to something like this. So I will add some filters here and do my sort. And I'm looking for things that are over and short. See if I can match any of those overages to the shortages. So I'm going to get rid of any of the zeros here. And at this point, if these were your items, you'd be looking for, okay, I know I've got a deduction related to a purchase order number or a specific date and DC. So you would be looking for, okay, I've got this overage column, I've got this shortage column. In this case, Target said they were short 59 of this item 1081. This may or may not work out. Let's do 1081. Oh, they've got this. So this is class 3. So we only want class 3. And looks like maybe we've got a match here. So we probably should have brought on some date information because we don't have any dates. We don't know if these were actually about the same time or not, but for keeping it simple, let's assume that these were about the same time. I'll zoom in here a little bit, but we can see, okay, they're short 59, but we also had for the same item at the same DC, they were over 53. So can you use some of that 53 to offset the shortage for that 59? And looks like they probably did do some, we've got some original quantities is different from the revised quantity. So there's a little bit of, EDI 850 and 860 purchase order changes going on there. But you could dispute, assuming it was like a misreceiving or something, or perhaps a valid shortage, you could use this overage to tell Target to pay back some of that shortage based on this data. Because that's some of what they're doing on their side when they're researching and doing due diligence on their deductions. So that was a lot. Let me check the questions real quick. Is there an index that gives a full name of each of the dimensions and metrics? There's not, Lori. That's a really great question. We do some of that at SupplyPike ourselves because there isn't, Target doesn't give you that. You can sometimes do some searching in partners online and find some hits on some of that, but they don't have a good listing of all of those comprehensively. We have that internally at SupplyPike, so maybe that's something we need to bring to the masses if that would be useful. But yeah, so I'm going to stop sharing and get back to our presentation here for a moment.
Why don't you put our emails up there on the slide just in case, so that people could kind of get that down just in case they have any other kinds of questions that might be coming in as a result of that. That was a lot, and sometimes it takes a while for the questions to really percolate. Yeah, so we'll show you guys our emails here for a little bit before we go into the more into the product preview of what SupplyPike has for as a target solution for deductions and other things as well. So that's that. And Clint, I think we don't have any more questions. Maybe they'll come in a little bit once we start the product preview portion. But I think that we'll go ahead and kind of pivot over to that. We're going to look at our SupplyPike product for Target. Again, if you're not interested in seeing SupplyPike's deductions solution for Target, you can feel free to step off at any point. It was great to have you. Thanks for joining us. But yeah, we're going to go ahead and go into that. And Clint basically is the target person, so he can answer whatever questions you have about this product as well. Yeah, but I'll go ahead and hand it back over to you since we don't have too many questions. Well, we did get one coming in here.
Cool.
Okay.
All
Yep.
right. So, yeah, we're going to take a look at our software that we have built to help with some of this. So let's bring our demo here. All right, so we are looking at our demo account right here. So Deductions Navigator for Target. We just did a little bit of some of the manual side of what we're trying to do with software for Target. You know, we talk a lot about deductions and compliance and revenue loss things here at SupplyPike because that's, you know, what we're working on, and we're trying to build software that makes dealing with all that easy. So this is what we've got so far. We launched this almost a year ago, just about. We're coming up on 1 year at the end of this month, and we support a few different types of disputing. We've got, we can handle shortages, we can handle returns, we can handle unpaid invoices. So lots of cool stuff. And we're going to be working more later this year on things like compliance disputes and contractual disputing. So things to look forward to. But yeah, when you land here, if you want to work with us, this is kind of a preview of some of the cool software and, from my point of view, all the cool, fun aggregations that we provide. So up top, we'll show you, hey, what have you won back? How much have you disputed through SupplyPike? Anything you've auto or bulk disputed will be right here. So like if I come over here and see, do we have any of these that are ready? Got this cool readiness filter that tells you anything that already has the documents they need. So this is not disputed. It's for $191. It's a shortage. I know I've got, because it's ready, I've got a chargeback document, I've got a bill of lading or a proof of delivery, I've got my invoice, maybe I've got a purchase order, I've got Target's delivery receipt, right? So files with Target's delivery receipt. Yeah, I've got that. So I'm going to check a few of these and just send them on over. And my point here is, because we've got this, it's for 3, I want to, we'll do 25, sure. I'm going to submit 25 disputes all at once. 25 deductions have been selected. Yes, I want to submit those, submit disputes. So right now, we would be sending, because this is just our demo company, so it's not real. It's all fake data, as you can see. I'll show you some more reasons how you can see that's fake in a minute. But we would be sending 25 disputes to Synergy right now. And those will flip over to Target Research and be in progress. And some of those will, if they're not still here in submitting status, they may have already flipped over here. And then later, this number right here is going to update for us. So that'll be, it's fun to watch these numbers go up for anything you've auto or bulk disputed, count and the amount. Auto prepped, that means that for 285 deductions, we have provided 100% of the proof you need for those to be ready to dispute. And that's 285 deductions with a combined 1,400 documents making up or supporting all 285 of those. And there's actually quite a larger number that would be behind this, as far as maybe, there's 3 out of 4 that we provided, and we haven't yet got that 4th one. So there could be a much greater number than just 1,400 here, depending on your company and your situation. Average days to dispute, what it sounds like, how long did a deduction go from being created until it was disputed? Deductions as a percent of what's invoiced. So that's like your total amount of deductions over your total amount of invoice dollars to target, to give you that percentage, like what percent of your business is being lost to deductions, that little piece of the pie there. And deductions cleared is taking, hey, what do you have in progress versus what's kind of done? So like a count of what's not yet disputed versus what has been paid or denied. So that's, in this case, about 40% of things have been handled. There's about 60% of things kind of still outstanding related to this actionable amount of deductions that have been received. So this is the breakdown over the course of the data we're showing here. So this is data for about a year, year and a half or so. We've got about 516,000, about 300,000 still on the table that hasn't been disputed yet. 775 has been won back with a win rate of about 83% based on what has been disputed. Some of these have been denied. You can redispute those with our app. Some of it's been paid, some of it has been approved, and we're waiting to see payment so that this amount can flow over here. And we've got a little bit in progress. So I'm kind of curious. Yeah, so let's refresh our dashboard here and see if it'll catch that amount right there. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so yeah, you remember we had 3 and then we had disputed those 25. So now we've got those, because we did those in bulk, we've got that captured up here. If you had your auto dispute set up, anything that gets auto disputed could also live here. So yeah, that's up to date there. Then we've got this aggregation by code. So hey, like what's our biggest offender? In this case, it's carton shortages. You can see that you can sort by count and amount. Maybe there's a small thing we don't need to worry too much about. Like maybe we thought we had an issue with cost, but it looks like perhaps we don't. If you've got buckets, you're kind of understanding like, hey, do we have big stuff or do we have paper cuts? In this case, looks like it's more paper cuts. But for a lot of vendors, oftentimes we'll see this under $100 count column shoot way up. So they've got a lot of paper cuts, and software really helps with those because you may not think it's worth going after it. But if it's a decent amount with a really high count, it doesn't make sense to put a person on that, but software, that's where you really want to have that. Trended over time by amount, by count. These are always fun. We've got our code filter. So if you want to figure out like, I want to see just our trend for maybe damage and defective, like how's that looking? Okay, it's going up this year. Like maybe we're doing something different operationally that's causing that to happen. How can we dig into that? Are there particular items that we're aggregating here that have a lot of deductions related to them? Are cotton hats or wooden gloves, cotton mouse. So these are our fake items for the demo. And then you can see your particular DCs that may be having issues here. So we'll show you the aggregation of which ones have the most problems by count and amount. So, and you can export this dashboard to get all this data. So if you want to have that trended data in a report in like your own PowerPoint or your own files, you can export it and you can have that here. So we kind of flipped over here. So this is kind of where the meat of the app lives. So I showed you, you can do a few of these at a time, or if you change your page view to 100, you could dispute 100 things at a time if you wanted to. We cap it at 500 per day. We don't want to overload Target too much. They do have people that are working this, not software. So capped at 500. But this is kind of where you can see the individual lines. If you want to get into the details of a specific deduction, you click into it with this little arrow here, and it takes you to our detail page. It tells you, hey, what's that shortage? If you need to know a little bit more about it, you can click this. It'll take you to a help article, What are the items that come off that chargeback document that we pull for you and pre-populate from the accounts payable app? Give me some information about the order, like what was the PO, what was that date, what was that invoice and the date, what was the check number the deduction came off of, did it have a DC related to it? We'll have a little history section here. And we provide, when we have access to the EDI data from Target's point of view, we provide the invoice, the PO, we do shipping document integrations to get bill of ladings, and anything else that might be relevant. We'll put all that in here. And, if it's ready to dispute, you can just send it over one by one. I've got it, it's on the way. So that's another one that's queued up. You can click next and send another one. We have a default kind of please repay comment there. You can add more context if you need to, like, hey, make sure to check page 5 of the BOL file. Sometimes they need a little extra guidance. Oh, but this one looks like it maybe needs a supplier agreement because of the code that it is. So we might skip this one because it's not ready. We don't have everything that's recommended. You can submit a dispute without all the necessary documents, but we would recommend you stick to the ones that have everything they need. So we can go back to ready and click in here and we're good to go. Submit that dispute. And once they're paid, they show up over here under all deductions, status, show me everything that's paid or approved. And there you go. And we'll tell you, hey, what for anything that's approved, it's not yet paid. We're waiting on proof to come through. But when they are paid, we'll tell you what was that check, what was that amount, and when was that date. So and then we do have unpaid invoices, similar thing. If they're past due, we'll pull in your invoice and your BOL, and you can dispute that whole past due invoice. We figure out the due date from your payment terms, then we add 7 days. And once it's at 7 days past the due date, we mark it as past due. You can come in here, dispute it, and get your money back. So I think that's about all we have time for. We've hit the limit. So I hope you guys have enjoyed this demo here, but I will flip back to our contact info if you guys have any questions.
Yeah, Clint, we did have one question that I think you could probably answer very quickly from Carlos here. He's wondering about when roughly we could expect a release for the compliance portion of SupplyPike Target.
Yeah, so for compliance deductions, we wanted to be doing those right now, but when Target made an announcement last quarter about changing their data sets, that kind of impacted our roadmap. So we don't want to build twice when we could be building one time and also building other valuable things. So right now, we're planning on having that out. I'm hoping by the end of Q3. And we may be doing kind of a phase thing where we have some early access and people can start using it maybe before it's fully featured and full-fledged. So if you're interested in that, do let us know. But yeah, hoping to have that out by the end of Q3.
All right, great. Thank you so much for that, Clint. It was super helpful and educational. Thank you all for joining us, and we'll see you next time.